Gold, the bigger amount of gold was found the first afternoon. There were 42 kilos. Primitive and inaccurate way of just chiseling out gold. I'm more inclined to believe in something like smuggling or an illegal cargo, which is, places where you pass.
Throughs, literally.
Exactly. So, hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will be talking about gold on the seabed without a shipwreck. So let's dive into it. During the exploration of the Colorado's Reef in the western end of Cuba, as I have mentioned in other episodes, we make a very large exploration of that area because it's very rich on shipwrecks. And I also have mentioned that this was done in a way that we were just swimming through the reefs because of the nice conditions that the place have. I mean, clean waters, normally calm waters. It's a shallow depth, so it is very easy with snorkel to spot shipwrecks or cannons or anchors or some evidence.
I assume that in the Caribbean that's relatively easy to do because the water is warm enough. You can put the divers with minimal gear, as you just mentioned, to survey stuff without needing so much apparatus, I guess.
It is, and also the fact that first, as the water is warm, you can
stay longer.
You can stay longer. You can make more effective that survey because also you have better control on the area you are exploring and the diver next to you. Because as the water is clean, you can see where he is or you can see where the other one is, and you make sure that your visual field overlaps the other.
It's accurate,
So you can, with a degree of accuracy, you can say, okay, this area is covered. We have seen that there is nothing at least obvious on the seabed. That was the methodology we used to explore the Colorado's Reef. It's as I mentioned, it's a long area. It's about 200 kilometers long with a lot of different reefs in different positions, and we were swimming and looking for shipwrecks in the west side of a key which is called the Jutias Key, Cayo Jutias, in the north of the province of Pinar del Rio, and we were just swimming there nicely, a nice day with very calm waters, shallow as I mentioned, and the reef in that area is like a barrier reef, so it's a long stretch of coral which is interrupted in some places by channels that go through the reef. It's kind of a break in the reef or a creek. We call them in Spanish pasas, which is places where you pass.
Throughs, literally.
Exactly. So you pass through those places from outside to inside the reef.
Those are natural.
Yes, those are natural, and some of them, the deeper ones, are remains of where a river was. It's like a riverbed that goes through the reef, but these are just the big ones. There are plenty of them that is just a break in the coral reef that is deep enough for a ship to go in and out. Small ships, normally small ships. Yeah, that's why we call it pasas, because it's a place that you can go through with your ship to the inner side of the reef. And yes, there are a few of them in this part of the reef, and curiously enough, we were swimming along the reef by the side parallelly to the reef, and everyone was checking. I mean, there was one diver almost on top of the reef and all of us a little bit outside, and then we came through one of these breaks and we continued swimming because we knew that the reef continues a couple of 100 meters there. But the captain of our boat, that exploration boat, and he was very attentive, he was looking and he started screaming waving and said, hey guys, check inside, so a little bit inside, get out of your line, get a little bit inside, because I can see another reef inside, which you are missing. If you continue in this direction, you will be missing that part of the reef.
Yeah, that spot.
So we went there swimming and we arrived there, and the first thing we saw was these discs of gold sitting on the rock but shining, like if you would have dropped them today, like 3 or
On
4.
the spot that you were gonna miss.
Exactly, where we were about to pass. So that was the first shocking thing with that wreck. As I have mentioned in other episodes, no wreck is exactly the same as another one. I mean, there are not two wrecks alike. Obviously, there are common things for every wreck, mainly in a certain period or a certain century. You will find sort of the same artifacts, you will find sort of the same distribution of the remains of the wreck, mainly if you are in the same geographical area, because the predominant winds are the same and the currents are the same. So yes, there is a pattern, but every wreck is different. And this one, it has been always a very interesting wreck. First, because the things we found in the wreck, but mostly because of the things we didn't find. And this was really puzzling since the very beginning, because let's be real, you find a wreck and sometimes, I mean, you find the cannons, you find the anchors, you find the ballast stones, you start the exploration or the survey of that wreck, and then you start finding lead sheeting from the hull, you start finding coins, you start finding cutlery, remains of ceramics and glass. So little by little you start discovering things on the shipwreck. And in this case, we arrived there, and also the gold, for being so heavy, and normally the objects made of gold, they are not that big, so they are normally small objects and very heavy, it tends to go deeper into the sediment than other artifacts, making it normally like the last type of artifact that you find in the excavation of a wreck, because it's deeper than the others. You start finding ceramic first, which is lighter, glass, and then you go deeper, then you find the silver and gold. Normally gold and mercury, they are quite deep.
It sinks quite heavy.
Yeah, it's quite deep into the sediment. So imagine we arriving there and finding first gold. First, you start finding gold incredibly, because as I said, the conditions of the sea were so nice, the water was so clear, it was so shiny.
That anyone would have seen it.
Yeah, but it was so shiny. I mean, it was, for us that work in that, is impossible to miss. I mean, it is impossible to miss. And then when we started collecting these pieces of gold, just ingots, they were these discs of gold, which are about 2 kilos or 2.5 kilos of weight. They were also these ingots that you have seen in movies and stuff, which are rectangular ones, not the ones with the bezels that you see everywhere, that they are
in the bank movies.
Exactly, they are much more modern or much more Hollywood style. But but these ones, they were also rectangular ingots, and we start finding all these even before seeing anything else. Anything else. The seabed in that place, it was like a quite homogeneous rock, not many coral colonies sticking out of the seabed, so the seabed was quite homogeneous, as I mentioned, so spotting these objects was very easy. And you could see after the first few minutes that people finding gold and we saying, what is this? We realized that yes, there were 4 anchors in the place, like making a line from north to south, 4 big anchors. Obviously it was a shipwreck. We didn't think that the gold fell from the sky, but we found these 4 anchors, a very small heap of ballast stones with a smaller anchor and a rudder pintle from the rudder attached to it. So yes, it was a wreck. And we started going around. I mean, I'm talking, we were on snorkel. There was no bottles or scuba diving gear at that moment in the water. We called the captain asking him to bring the boat closer, because people couldn't swim with 5 kilos more. In this case of gold, not lead, but with 5 kilos more, swim 800 meters to put it back in the boat. And everyone has this feeling of, if I go to the boat and I come back, I may not find the place again because we haven't put a buoy on it. You know, you get excited and you get nervous with such a find. So the boat came closer, we started putting the ingots in the boat. The captain was with the eyes like this, asking, where are you getting this? I mean, this didn't happen to us before, ever. You find these little pieces of gold or jewelry or a few coins or something, but the piece of gold this size sitting...
And let alone...
Sitting on the seabed.
See, and let alone being the first thing that you find.
Yeah, exactly. This wreck, it started backwards. It started the other way around. It started by the end of the movie, and then we started discovering that first, yes, it was a shipwreck. So far, it was just gold. And, well, I'm mentioning gold because obviously gold was that make us more excited with the find. But together with the gold, we start finding also quite a large amount of silver ingots. Silver, it was not as shiny as the gold, but you could spot them. After the more obvious artifacts were recovered, we started looking in the seabed for geometrical shapes that wouldn't be natural. And that way we found quite some silver ingots and gold ingots as well, that they were covered with sea growth and you didn't see it shining. You have to separate it from the seabed with a knife, because at that moment, remember, we were with snorkel and spear fishing gear, actually, not diving gear. So you separate it from the seabed with the knife, and then when you turn it around, it was like this really bright yellow color that is unmistakable. So we, after that afternoon, we sent news to our company in Havana, said we have found this. We proposed that we stop the survey or the exploration and we dedicate some time to this wreck to explore a little bit more and to make a plan to see if we will excavate the wreck or what to do with it. So we decided to make a metal detection now, already with bottles and everything, a metal detection around the area, because at the time we couldn't still limit the wreck site area, because by that moment we haven't limited the area of the shipwreck, how the debris field looks like, because we only have seen 4 anchors, this little ballast stone pile with the rudder pintle and with a little anchor. So we were a little bit at loss. The seabed was quite flat and quite homogeneous, so it was difficult to figure out where the wreck material ends. So we decided to make this long and very thorough metal detection, because we knew that we will be finding gold and we will be finding silver. With the metal detector, we assumed that much more than with just your bare eyes. For instance, as you were saying, how people would have seen it before. In this metal detection, we found the spear of one spear fisherman with the barb, you see, with this barb and everything, in the rock, like stuck in the rock. So someone was spear fishing there way before we arrived.
In the area and still missed it.
Way before we arrived. And the gold, I tell you, it was glittering. Not all of it, but most of it.
No, and I remember from the other episode that picture of the coral kind of like a poof, like the coral, round coral with the ingot on top of, and you could see it like it had been dropped on that day. And for me, I wonder, because I've been thinking about asking you this question, what is it in that area that probably allowed that to happen and that gold to sit there untouched for so many years, being that the water is so transparent that it sounds like it's an area that the ocean can be calm, clearly would be a top area for people to go spearfishing, because coral and reef attracts more animals. You would think that it has some sort of traffic for the people that are sea people, ocean people. So I really wonder, were the currents too big that people don't... I don't get it. I don't get how it was missed.
I with you in that question. I don't get it either. I can only think how many of these places were around and they are not anymore.
Totally, exactly. See how many other pieces of gold were taken.
And taken.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't have an answer that I would believe myself that why this a couple of times this has happened in that area. I don't know. I'm as surprised as you or anybody else. So we were doing this metal detection, and one of the interesting things of the gold we were finding, let's say that the first afternoon, the first day that we found the wreck with the snorkel, we recovered the biggest and more obvious ingots of gold and silver. Then with the metal detector, we started finding smaller pieces and the ones that were a little bit under the superficial layer of the seabed. It's important to notice here, because that was subject of discussions on board and we trying to figure out what was the best way of doing it. It's important to say that even being so heavy, the gold, it was never found any piece of gold deeper than, let's say, 2 or 3 centimeters under the seabed. The seabed is so hard and it's so homogeneous that there were not so many cracks or holes in the seabed.
And spaces between.
There were few of them, and there were few of them, and there was some accumulation of gold artifacts in those places. But mainly they were like really superficial. Even if you don't see it at first, and you pass the metal detector, it would ring, and you will find the gold really close to it. Interesting about this gold is that from the many pieces of gold we found, there was no ownership mark. There was no marks that would help you in the identification of the provenance of that gold. There were no coins, so there was no gold coins together with these gold artifacts. We found also a format of gold being transported in little truncated pyramids that you separate one from the other and you use to pay as a currency. We found little, like, with the chocolate bars, when you break this square.
Like a square.
Well, we found quite some of those being chiseled out of the bigger ingots. So you find the ingot with the hole of where this square was, and then you find these squares around. That was also a habit or a practice to pay for stuff. That means that they didn't have coinage on board. They have to pay with the raw metal,
broken gold,
the raw metal itself, which will put the ship in the very early 16th century.
I was just about to ask you, is there a way, so clearly before coinage was more often used, and is that a way that was specific for a specific country and side of the world that would have helped you check the provenance of the potential?
Yes and no, because since very early, the ships also transported coinage made in Europe before the mint houses in America started producing coins. And second, that's what I said, no, because you could have coinage that wouldn't put you in a certain, let's say, period in which coins were not used. But at the same time, it is almost impossible for a ship, let's say after 1550, going around in the Americas to go traveling without coinage and paying with such a primitive and inaccurate way of just chiseling out gold from an ingot. These ingots also were quite irregular. They were quite crude. So I'm more inclined to believe in something like smuggling or an illegal cargo.
Transportation.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was...
Not a ship that was traveling with the fleet for the crown in an organized way. That's what I think. It could be anything, but that's what I think so far.
From the way that you're telling it, and from us doing the channel and me spending time around you with this information, I was thinking, without being an archaeologist, that it is probably smuggling, because nobody went to pick it up either. It feels like from the way that you're describing it, it sounds like there were low efforts to retrieve, being that it wasn't so sunk.
They couldn't even reported it.
Correct,
Either
exactly.
They all die, or the ones that survived and that went through land, they wouldn't report it because they were doing something illegal. This is a place, by the way, I haven't mentioned it, but this is a place that is called Pasa de Galera, so the Galera Creek, and we call the wreck the Galera wreck because we have never found which ship it was. So it's known between us like the Galera wreck. That was 1994. Yeah, 30 years already. Jeez.
See, literally 30
Okay.
years.
Okay. For me, it's like it was yesterday. I have it so clear in my mind because this place, this Galera wreck, is about 3 or 4 nautical miles from the coast. The coast in that part of Pinar del Rio province, it has very little towns, very little human settlements. There is one, it's called Rio del Medio, but they lived there, probably, I don't know, at that time there was probably 100 people, no more than that. So very little. It's all mangrove in the coast. It's not an easy access place.
So probably back then there was zero civilizations
Yeah.
in that
In that
area.
moment, 100%. And even today, there are very little human settlements in that area. That apparently the area is not very attractive. Maybe it has no fresh water, or I don't know. And this was also in a very shallow part of the reef. When we started excavating, after you get the metal detector hit and you break some rocks and you pile them together, because you have to pile them together, this rubble, away from your working area so you can continue working and this don't get in the way. We make a small hill, and sometimes it was out of the water. I mean, when we were throwing with the boxes, with the crates, we were throwing the rubble there. You have to put it in the sides because on the top you have to go out of the water. There are plenty of times that we just stand there with the water in your chest, and it was an
picking up gold this. Hey, I found it!
It was an incredible place. It was an incredible experience. We spent there like about 3 years excavating and searching and working. We even found something which was also very curious, which was very little spheres of gold, like beads of ornament or a chain, but really small one, and plenty of them, to the point that they look like gold dust, like the natural alluvion is called in Spanish, this gold that you find in the rivers that is in very little, it's like
pebbles. It's the little pebbles from...
The little ones. But these ones, no, because when you have a better look at them, they were all round and the same size, so they were made. And there was one of the divers, Ramoncito, who brought from his house. He came up with a very good solution because we were struggling recovering these little gold balls with the how do you call
tweezers?
With tweezers we were with tweezers we were trying to recover one by one these things, but
didn't you see Gold Rush? You need to get a thingy that goes like this.
They were like stick in the rock. They were like just embed there. You have to take it out one by one, and we couldn't see properly. And this guy Ramoncito, he brought a piece of plastic that either his mother or his grandmother had at home to sew or something, and it was perfect because you went with this piece of plastic down there, you put it there, and then these little balls suddenly were bigger and you can pick them up better. So it was a very interesting wreck in the sense of what we found, but I mentioned in the beginning of the video that it was also very interesting and very mysterious for us and puzzling because of the things we didn't find, because there was no one nail or pin or any joinery that the ship for sure must have. There was not a piece of cutlery, not even a fragment. There was not one fragment of ceramics. There was not one fragment of the hull sheeting, of the cover of the hull that we find also so frequently. There was not one fragment of glass. It's like, okay, there were the anchors, there were some pieces of artillery also. We call them in Spanish cerbatana. It's like a bombard. There are a very very early pieces of artillery. I mentioned those in the Inés de Soto wreck as well. They will also place the wreck in the first half of the 16th century because of the type of artillery that was used at that moment. But apart from that, and these pieces of artillery, which were just two with the two breech chambers, so the chambers you used to load them, they were found under the coral. So they were found with the metal detector. We have to open a hole in the coral and we found these two pieces of artillery. So yes, it was a ship, but it was a ship that just left two pieces of artillery, 4 anchors, and plenty of gold and silver and nothing else. It has been very puzzling. I mean, still today we talk about that, friends, when we meet.
It's so fun and interesting, and also in my brain explains a lot of, like, I was just thinking that would be so easy. All of those facts would be so easy to prove my confirmation bias that I already have from this story without even having been there or anything. To me, the lack of finding things that you would find in a normal shipwreck that would account for people being there, for there being a list properly of what's in the boat and everything else, and it sounds like piracy. It makes me imagine, like, maybe in the movies of, like, maybe their ships weren't built as well as the others. Also, that's why you don't find as many things. The story just highlights to me the difficulty and important side of challenging your own biases in this line of work. Because for me, it would be like, yeah, this is enough information for me to think that this is smuggled stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
well,
yes,
you
understand?
It adds up. This, what you're mentioning, adds up to that theory. Yes, of course. But I don't know, there could...
But maybe not. Maybe this is completely on the side.
There could be plenty of reasons why the wreck is so weird.
It could be as simple that in the week that the ship sank, the currents were abnormally strong, and what remained was the heaviest stuff possible.
Yeah,
it could be something as simple as that.
It could be...
There's a freak of nature situation.
Plenty of stuff, and trust me that when the divers that participate there, which we still remain friends for so many years, 30 years I realize now, we sit together and talk. The most incredible theories come up and everyone is trying to answer something that we don't have enough elements to answer, to start with. I have also an example of how unusual this wreck was, that we had 2 boats there. We have a smaller boat, it's called Escorpión, which I was working at that time, and the Aries boat, that it was a bigger ship with more divers. And one day I was swimming from one boat to the other with my snorkel. So I was just swimming to go to the other boat and talk to the captain about something. And we have been working there for 6 months already, or 7 months. We were with metal detectors going up and down. And I, swimming between the 2 boats, the 20 meters that separates the 2 boats, I found something which I thought in the beginning it was like a soda can or a beer can, completely smashed, and that you could see the bottom of it, so round and shiny. So I saw it from the surface and I said, these guys are throwing the cans to the sea.
Polluting,
we shouldn't do.
Guys.
Yeah, one thing is polluting, which obviously in 1994 we were not all that aware of that. But the second part is that it's contaminating my working area, that I have to go with the metal detector.
Don't confuse me.
Yeah,
Don't confuse me with like modern artifacts, man. What the...
So I went down and I picked up that can bottom, and it was an ingot of silver of almost 3 kilos. And it was shining there, and we have been working for 6 or 7 months up and down with metal detectors. This is that in the sea, in underwater archaeology or a shipwreck archaeology, you should never be absolute about your findings or to call a wreck finished and that you have done everything, because in the sea it's very easy that a small part of the seabed is missing in one go. That in the moment that you went with the metal detector, it came a big wave and pushed you there 3 meters, and then you go back, but you don't go back exactly to the same place you were. So these things happen, and one have to have that in mind always in the research. At the end, we spent there about 3 seasons, so during 3 years, about 8 months each year. But the main amount of gold, the bigger amount of gold was found the first afternoon. There were 42 kilos. 42 kilos of gold in an afternoon without wearing a bottle. And that for our American friends is like 93 pounds. 93 pounds of gold. It's a lot of gold. And then along the other 3 years, we found a few kilos more, but not in the proportion we expected now with metal detectors and everything. But from the research point of view, these 3 years were very important, was into define that the ship, it was a very unusual ship because we didn't find the things that we supposed to find. And that only make us think, at least along the years, that there is a big part of the ship, or the ship itself, that end up somewhere else. Downwind, most probably, obviously, will not come against the waves. It will go, in the way to land, which opens a new field of investigation for the future, for whoever wants to find the missing part of the Galera wreck, because there are so many things missing that it cannot be by other reason than a part of the ship, or the large part of the ship, just was washed away from that place that is very shallow, that is very flat. There is no reason why the ship would stay there forever. So some of the things were either thrown overboard, or there was a significant break in the hull of the ship and things spill out. But I don't believe that the ship stayed there too long, because then we would have found all these things I mentioned that they are absent in the place. I'm telling you this story because of first because of the unusual fact that you find, first of all, what you normally find at the end, and second, because it's gold. Gold is always interesting. It's such a rare find that you always remember the finds of gold with a special interest. And also to give you the same impression I have of how enigmatic the sea, the ocean could be, when sometimes things that you expect are not there, and things that you don't expect are in such a situation in which you almost cannot believe that nobody have seen it before, which is obviously the case, because whoever would have been swimming there and recognized that this is a piece of gold will take it, because it's just normal. And the fact is that before us, there were people there spearfishing. We have proof of that. There were people there maybe swimming or diving, and nobody just saw that gold for 450 years. That is a very unusual situation. I like to share this strange experience with you. And if you like the video, I ask you to leave it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it, and let's keep on diving.